Welcome to the fifth lesson of the 7-part mini-series on how to write an effective diet plan. Now, over the last two lessons, we covered the macronutrients and specifically the timing and quantity of 3 of the main micronutrients. What we're going to cover in today's lesson is going to be the micronutrients. So the micronutrients are those nutrients that the body only needs in very small amounts, just in order to be healthy and for all the cells to carry out all their essential functions. If we have too little or too much of any micronutrient, either of those can lead to adverse health effects. So what we want to do is ensure we're getting just the right amount. Now we can classify our micronutrient intake based on a set of reference values. So the adequate intake refers to the amount that will meet the needs of about 50% of the population. Okay? The recommended daily allowance, or the recommended nutrient intake, will meet the needs of about 97.5% of the population. The upper limit will not cause adverse health effects in about 97.5% of the population. And then the no observed adverse effect level is the amount that has not been shown to cause adverse health effects. So, as a rule of thumb, if someone is below the adequate intake level, there's a high chance that they can develop a deficiency. Because even at the adequate intake level, about 50% of the population will not be meeting their needs. So if someone is between the AI and RDA, they're at a moderate risk of deficiency because, again, like we said, about 50% of the population, the AI is not enough to meet their requirements. If someone is between the RDA and the upper limit, generally they're within that range where they'll have enough to meet their minimum requirements, but not excess amounts where they'll have adverse health effects or have toxicity. Between the upper limit and the no observed adverse effect level is where we have an uncertainty factor. So at this point here, you may or may not get adverse health effects. So as a rule of thumb, you want to aim to be between the RDA and the upper limit. Okay. So how do you track someone's micronutrient intake? Well, in our software, the iNutrition Pro, every food that a client puts in, every supplement that we put in there, it actually tracks the micronutrient specs. So at the end, we have a basically daily breakdown of micronutrient intake, and it even suggests which food contains certain micronutrients. So if someone's having too much or too little of a certain micronutrient, they can either decrease that food or increase the amount of foods that has more of the micronutrient to make sure they're getting their needs. Now, if you're not tracking micronutrient intake, we suggest don't experiment with mega dosing certain micronutrients, because if someone has an excess, that can cause adverse effects, and especially certain vitamins like vitamin A, vitamin D, so forth, can actually be toxic in high doses. So unless you know specifically someone's micronutrient intake, or you've done blood work to look at certain levels of micronutrients in the body, I would suggest it's best to just stick to a multivitamin, which is just a broad-based multi-nutrient formula, contains just trace amounts of each of the micronutrients just to meet the minimal levels, okay? But unless you know specifically that someone's deficient in their diet, you don't want to make a dose certain micronutrients. Like, for example, if we track through the software that someone's not getting enough dairy, for example, because they may be intolerant to dairy, their calcium intake is low, then we can go and specifically prescribe calcium supplementation. But if we don't know through the diet whether they're getting enough or they're not getting enough, then it's best to just stick to prescribing a multi, okay? So that's the micronutrients. In tomorrow's lecture, we're going to actually look at nutrient periodization. So how to set up someone's diet over the course of a longer period of time, because no diet will work for everyone and no diet's going to work forever. So I will see you tomorrow. Thank you for tuning in.